We arrived at the island the day before the season and were greeted by rough seas and heavy winds. This led to some minor boat mishaps, but at least the water was clear and you can't feel the wind down deep. Our first dive at the famous underwater arch was partly to scout what depth the lobster were holding, but mostly to have a scenic dive in a nice spot. The arch was loaded with huge numbers of juvenile and adult blacksmiths. The cracks were full of lobster, treefish, and sheephead. Our scouting around the island showed us big lobster in abundance at all the depths we were interested in diving. Closer to the island, there were a lot more sea lions, but there were still lobsters. This giant bug we wanted to find again at midnight, but we never did. After some minor wind-related mishaps in the evening, we still got in the water just a few minutes after midnight. There was lots of bait in the water, and the sea lions were pushing flying fish around the cove. The normal creatures of the night were out, and this includes the lobster. Here, I find it hard to hold the camera on a lobster and grab it at the same time. I found a good-sized lobster peeking out of a hole. When I shined my light at her, she backed up. I managed to reach into the hole, get an antenna, and slowly work her out of the crack. I didn't have a perfect grip, but I wanted to showboat to the camera, so she peeled out of my hand by dropping her antenna. I battered her back into her original hole, which she no longer felt confident in its security. After a short bit, she walks out and goes in my bag. Here I see two lobster and quickly decide which one's bigger and grab that one. I did not accomplish much filming during the daytime. I was focusing on lobster, but we did have some nice day dives, and we didn't have many lobster to get by the evening, despite it being rough and windy. Saturday evening, we only needed to get a couple more lobster, so I was able to film some Guadalupe cardinalfish, grass rockfish, rock scallops, and some smaller lobsters. Sunday was a lot calmer, but it was still rough and windy. Again, we only need a couple more lobster for our daily limit on this evening dive. I saw some interesting creatures on this dive, including a turbot on top of a rock, piles of young lobsters hanging out, and green abalone in a crack. This lobster is coming towards my light, but not quite close enough for me to grab. I know where it must be headed, and there it is, walking on the sand. There are other lobster around, and I make some practice catch and releases. This is a good time to pry a few scallops. A swimmer crab is eating some scallop leavings from earlier in the day. Heading into a cave full of sea lions that we pulled some nice lobsters from yesterday. We only managed a couple more out of this spot, but the scenery more than made up for it. This lobster looked too small to even bother measuring. This has to be one of my favorite dive spots. We drop to 60 feet and go off a cliff. There's a school of yellowtail chasing some juvenile blacksmiths and jack mackerel. And there's some sea lions doing the same thing. In the wall of the drop-off, there's a huge opening for a cave that we swim into. The place is full of gorgonians and rockfish. This being a deep dive, there are not a lot of lobsters, but I find a good one and measure a short one. This cave has a huge opening, and you can swim in quite a ways, and as you go in, you see it bends to the left. As you swim off to the left, you see the opening or exit of the same cave, so you can swim all the way through this huge chunk of rock. The awesome visibility and abundant fish life makes a very scenic safety stop and a nice end to the trip.